Hello everyone. I wanted to put together a brief tutorial video here. I'm going to try to keep this as brief as I can anyway. There's a lot that I kind of want to discuss. There's a common misconception over kind of like what's happening with your device as to why. So we've had a lot of reports. We've had several reports of maybe users who might not be the most tech savvy and able to manage their memory to keep our app running. So what ends up happening, here you can see, I have the wind input assist over here that I'm putting in. And what happens is they'll get on the course, for instance, and, they'll be close to running their capacity for memory. And what'll happen is, Golf Clash will, need certain space, for instance. So what ends up happening is the OS starts killing some of these weaker things. So one of the things that'll be first to go is things like the notebook app, for instance. And why does that happen? It's because it's such a small app. It doesn't require a lot of memory to run. So what the OS is going to do is it's going to prioritize and say, okay, we have all these huge things open. Maybe you guys have Messenger open. Maybe you have Chrome open. Maybe you have obviously Golf Clash, because that's what you'll be using our app for. And it has all these large things. And when Golf Clash, essentially asks for free RAM, and if it's not available, what you might see end up happening is it will kill the process, or will actually, potentially cause, basically damage to the app until you do some kind of force stop on our app and reload. Once your memory frees up, you can have this basically gap where you make the app run to hard to function properly. I personally have never experienced this, so that's why I wanted to put this video together. I understand that so I use personally the Samsung Note 9, and I actually got the big boy version too. There's two versions that you can get. One has upgraded RAM and memory storage, and that's the one that I'm using right now to play on. And part of that has to do with how much YouTube content that I provide. I wanted to make sure that I have plenty of storage. So if I was to go in and, to my files here, you can see the internal storage up to 500. I have half a terabyte here in terms of storage, but you can actually see that I use a lot of it, and it's videos like this and the tournament guides, which ends up eating a lot of that. I also have a secondary SD card right now. It's just kind of a backup. I'll probably end up actually converting a lot of this over to the memory card and then freeing up a lot of my memory at a later period of time, the hard drive space. But let's take a look at this. I wanted to go over some things involving memory management. Do keep in mind, all this, you don't need to have a device this good to play Golf Clash. But if you do, it does enhance the experience definitely. So let's take a look at the device maintenance here. If I was to go into memory here, you're going to see that currently, and if you don't have, I don't know if you have this option. Every version of the Android, if you're running 7.0, for example, I can't remember if this is on there as a feature, but when I go into memory here from the settings, you can see that right now my system and apps are using 4.2 gigabytes of my 8 total. So with 4 to play with, I'm good. Like, I barely ever close stuff down. But look at these things that are running. Chrome, Messenger. If you can get rid of these things, and these are the two that I continuously talk to people about getting rid of. Look at Facebook. Half a gig on Facebook. Look at Golf Clash. I'm using half a gig on Golf Clash. Let's say you're using a device that only has 2 gigabytes of RAM. you need to make sure that you're not using these. If you are playing on a device that only has 2 gigabits of RAM, this Messenger app probably shouldn't even exist on your device. I hope you have a secondary device that you could use all that messenger and stuff for. But if you do have these on here, that's okay too. You just want to make sure that they get force closed. And that's essentially what's going to happen if I do this clean feature up here. So what that'll do is it'll essentially force close a lot of all this stuff. So when I actually, check mark on these, I could just hit clean now and it'll essentially, free that up. I'm going to just go ahead and do that right here. And you'll see a lot of this stuff just gets killed because it's not being actively used. There's nothing that it needs to be running. So after I do that, if I was to, and funny enough, it actually didn't close the Golf Clash Notebook app, and that's because it's such a small chunk of the memory. So it's actually killing off the bigger things here to make room because they're not being used. So what that's actually doing is kind of the reverse as what I mentioned. But as I mentioned, if I go in here into device maintenance, you may or may not have this. Another thing you can look into is kind of a secondary. You can look into a secondary third-party app if you'd like to, do something similar if you don't have this option. But let's just go in here and try to find a couple things. Facebook's barely being used, and I don't even see Notebook should be on here. It's got to be on here somewhere. Let me see if I can trigger this another way. I'm going to just close it down real quick and then repop it up. See if it kind of pops up to the forefront here when I do this. So let's take a look. So you can still see how much we're using. I've seen this on here before. I'm not sure why it's not popping up. Our app usually uses somewhere in the neighborhood of somewhere between 100 and 200 megabits. It's a very, very small process considering everything else. Golf Clash is going to be higher. Of course, you're going to have to use them in parallel for one another. And for some reason here, I can't see it. I know I have, been able to trigger it into this list before. I've seen it, but I don't know what I did to make that happen. But here you can see, Golf Clash itself takes up so much memory. And similar with those Facebook, with the Messenger, you can see how much it actually was. So cleaning those up are going to be essential if you want to actually play the game. And by closing them down, that means, if you needed to do it the long way and you couldn't actually do it this way, you would need to go to apps. You would need to go to, a specific app, for instance, Chrome, and hit this force stop button. So also in here where you see storage, you can see something which is called clear cache. So you can do this with with some of your apps as well. That'll help them to run a little bit smoother. So if I was to come down here and go to Golf Clash here, and you can see that my cache here is basically, kind of storing here 130. If I was to go ahead and clear this out, it'll actually lower the process because there's more freed up now for me to basically, be using with the app. So it's going to make it run that much more efficiently as well. So, that will help if you're getting needle lag. I've had that help. And then what I'll typically do is you can also hit force stop on stuff. If you need to manually do that, that will free up your RAM. So I'm thinking about things like Messenger, for instance, Facebook. If you're playing on a device with only 2 gigabytes of storage, one of the things that you might want to be thinking about is making sure that those things aren't actively running on your RAM while you try to use Notebook, because as I mentioned, the Notebook app itself uses so little RAM that the OS will basically view it as kind of just something that doesn't need to be open, and that's when it'll start to kill these processes once you get to, say, 95% memory usage. And it's really going to make things harder on your processor to find this available memory for things to run. So that's why you'll see things like Notebook get killed, because they take up such small space that those will be the first things that they're like, oh, well, you don't need this small thing. What is it? We're just going to close it down. But we can see that you're using Golf Clash, so and it's taking up a lot of your RAM, and it's in the forefront. So since it's in the foreground process, they're never going to kill foreground, like the Golf Clash. They're never going to kill something that big, especially when it's in your foreground. So, it's going to basically prioritize what ends up happening, and that's what you're seeing more or less with why you may see Golf Clash Notebook, for instance, get killed. But even more so, you might see that, some of the memory could get, kind of messed up for the app because of certain processes that the OS shut down. So you'll typically need a reboot and what you'll end up seeing is, I've heard like guys, their clubs here, these will basically disappear. It's because, part of the Notebook process got killed and is no longer running. So in order to get it back, you would need to force stop, and you can do that from the notifications tab up here when you go. And once you force stop it, then once you reactivate it, keeping in mind that you have the spare memory, then you will see it pop back up and all these clubs and stuff will be in here. But as I mentioned, I've never personally seen it happen, but I know that's what's causing it. So it is something that you just want to be mindful of, you want to be considering, and especially if you're running those devices 2-3 gigabytes, it's very, very tight space-wise, and the way the Android system is, it's very challenging for the operating system to not get overwhelmed, and it's not. It seems like Apple seems to have kind of an edge with the way that they handle memory in terms of processes. They seem to really clean things up a little bit better. So what you're seeing on the Android device is, kind of our Golf Clash Notebook app taking a hit memory-wise, where you could potentially run into problems if you're not thrifty with the way that you guys handle your memory. So that's why I wanted to put this video out here for you guys. Definitely be mindful of all these tricks that I'm mentioning. I kind of went over everything that I wanted to cover. And, just be thinking about those things consciously. In here with the settings, if you don't have this device maintenance, just to kind of summarize here, where I have the memory kind of on breakdown here with everything that I kind of have running here, things that you can consider doing is once you log into your Facebook account with the Facebook, just go ahead and kill Facebook after doing that. You could see from the beginning of this video, I was using roughly 500-600 megabytes. You know how much that is if you're, and all it has to do is you have to open it to even link your account. So it has to be open. So unless you go behind and kill that process after you're actually logged into your account, you're basically using up 500 megabits that doesn't need to be used. So another thing that you want to do when you're playing Golf Clash is make sure that you don't have Facebook running, Facebook Messenger. You could see that from the beginning of my video, if I had Golf Clash, Facebook, Messenger, and Google Chrome open, those, and none of them were in the foreground. So all of these things were in the background running. And that alone would have been taking up 2 gigabytes. So for you guys with these limited memory devices, this is something that you need to strongly be thinking to just be a little bit more conscientious with the way that you do things. So one of the things that you can do is, if I was to go to Facebook right now and, open this process. So I basically just open the process. I can go into Golf Clash. I can load the account. So I'll just do this for you guys real quick, just so you can see this physically being done. And, as I mentioned, if you only have a 2 gigabyte device, you might not even want to use Messenger. You don't need it for Golf Clash. So, if you can get by with just uninstalling it, that would be ideal. Secondarily, you can just make sure that you do force close it if you are going to go play Golf Clash. Make sure that you force close manually in the apps. So once I load my account, here you can see that I loaded it. I'm just going to go into the device maintenance here just so you can physically see that process here. Here you can see Facebook. Just on fresh boot, I'm already using 300 from Facebook alone. So if I want to, let's say I don't have that screen and I needed to do this manually, well, I can go in here to Facebook. I can go into Facebook here and force close the app after I'm logged in, because once I'm logged in, I no longer need Facebook. And then once that I do this, and if I was to go back to the memory management, you'll see that I freed up that 300 some megabits of RAM. So these are the things that you'll want to be doing. Similarly with Messenger, if I even open it and it's just running in the background, I'm going to be using about 300 megabits at least, just by pressing on the button one time. So similarly, I would want to go to settings. I would want to go down to apps. I would want to go down to Messenger down here. And I would just want to, hit on the force stop. Of course, force stopping it here is doing nothing because I didn't open it and I've already got that shut down from my device manager. So, if you don't have an OS that allows you to see that device management, you might want to look into third-party apps just so you could maybe just kind of see everything that's running currently, and it might actually give you a faster ability to open and close things down. So it might just be something to think about. I don't personally use one because I don't need one, but you might want to be thinking about that, especially if you have limited resources on your Android device. So hopefully you guys found this useful. Good luck with your future, performance. I hope that this helps you guys at least be thinking a little bit more mindful and being a little bit more careful with the way that you are opening and closing stuff down, and also conscientious about things that could still be actively running even though they're in the background. Okay, so just because I go off of Facebook and, swipe it from my recent apps, it's not going to actually force close it down. It's still going to be kind of running in your background. So you will still have that allocation of your resources in the memory. So hopefully, you can better manage these. And, keep your Golf Clash and Golf Clash notebook working much more in harmony together. So good luck out there, guys, and I'll see you guys on future tutorials. Take care.